Okay, here we go again. That time of year rolls around, and everyone starts wondering, what's the Atlantic hurricane season going to bring this time?
Yeah, there's always that mix, isn't there? A bit of anticipation, maybe a little bit of concern too.
Definitely concern. And, last year was such a stark reminder that it's not just the coast, the inland flooding that can reach really far.
Absolutely. Those impacts go way beyond the immediate shoreline. That's something we really need to keep in mind.
It really is. So, welcome back, everyone, to the Meteorology Matters podcast. Today, we are going to get right into it. The expert predictions, the latest ones, for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season.
We've looked at the outlooks, and yeah, the goal today is to really unpack what matters most.
To help you understand what you need to know as we head into the season, it's about getting the key takeaways.
Cutting through the noise,
Yeah,
basically. It's
yeah.
focusing on what the science is telling us right now.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the basics. Just a quick refresher. When does the Atlantic season officially run?
All right, the official dates haven't changed. June 1st right through November 30th.
That's the main window we watch, covers the Atlantic, Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, the whole basin.
Exactly. That 6-month period is when we see the vast majority of activity.
And historically speaking, what does a sort of average or typical season look like in terms of storm numbers?
Well, if you look at the long-term average, you're typically talking about 14 named storms.
Okay, 14. And how many of those usually become hurricanes?
Usually around 7 of those reach hurricane strength, and then out of those 7, about 3 become major hurricanes.
Right, major hurricanes. Let's define that quickly. What pushes a storm into that major category?
Good question. A major hurricane is category 3, 4, or 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale.
So that means winds, what, over 110 miles per hour?
Sustained winds of 111 miles per hour or higher, yeah.
Yeah.
These are the ones that, pose the biggest threats, wind, obviously, but also often catastrophic storm surge and really intense rainfall.
Got it. So that's the baseline, the historical average. Now for the main event. What are the big forecasts saying for 2025? What's the headline?
Okay, the main forecast we often look to first is from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And their latest outlook points pretty strongly toward an above-normal season this year.
Above normal. Okay, that definitely gets your attention. How confident are they feeling about that prediction?
They're putting a 70% confidence level on their forecast ranges. Specifically, they're saying there's a 60% chance the season will be above normal.
60%. And the chances for near normal or below normal?
Much lower. 30% chance of a near normal season and just a 10% chance of below normal season.
Oh.
So the odds are definitely tilted towards active.
Okay, and what about the actual numbers? What ranges are they forecasting for storms?
Their forecast is for 13 to 19 total named storms this season.
13 to 19. And hurricanes within that?
Right. Out of those, they expect 6 to 10 to become hurricanes.
6 to 10. And the majors, the Cat 3s and higher.
They're forecasting 3 to 5 major hurricanes.
3 to 5 majors? That's,
Yeah.
well, it's a range, but the upper end is definitely concerning. How does this line up with other forecasts, like, say, Colorado State University's? I know they put one out earlier.
Yeah, good point. CSU's April forecast, for instance, gave more specific numbers. 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes.
So pretty similar ballpark, but NOAA gives the range.
Exactly. NOAA's approach is to provide those ranges because, honestly, there's always uncertainty in these long-range seasonal outlooks. CSU and some others give their single best estimate. Both are valuable ways to look at it.
Okay, but the overall message seems clear. The consensus is leaning towards an active, above-normal season. So why? What are the main climate factors pushing the forecast in that direction?
Right. There are several key factors kind of aligning this year. One of the big ones is what's happening, or rather not happening, in the Pacific Ocean with ENSO, El Niño, and La Niña.
Okay, so where are we with ENSO?
We are currently in an ENSO-neutral phase. So neither El Niño nor La Niña is really in charge right now.
Neutral. Now, I remember El Niño usually means fewer Atlantic hurricanes, right? Because of wind shear.
That's generally true, yeah. Strong El Niño tends to increase upper-level wind shear over the Atlantic, which basically tears developing storms apart. La Niña, on the other hand, often reduces shear, helping storms.
So if it's neutral, does that mean shear isn't a major factor either way?
Well, it means that dominant ENSO influence isn't there, which actually makes the forecast a bit trickier because it allows other factors to potentially play a bigger role in how the season shapes up.
Ah, okay. So the absence of El Niño or La Niña opens the door for other conditions to dominate. What are those conditions looking like?
Well, the big one is the Atlantic Ocean itself. The water temperatures across most of the basin are warmer than average.
And warm water is hurricane fuel.
Exactly. It provides the heat energy storms need to form and intensify. Now, there is an interesting wrinkle this year.
Oh, what's that?
While the basin is warm overall, the specific area known as the main development region, this stretch between Africa and the Caribbean where a lot of powerful storms get started, is actually running a bit cooler than it was at this exact time last year. Maybe around 2 degrees Fahrenheit cooler.
Huh. Compared to the record heat we saw going into last season, that sounds like a pretty noticeable difference in that key spot.
It is noticeable, and it's definitely something forecasters are watching. It introduces a bit of uncertainty compared to last year's setup.
Could that cooler pocket dampen things down significantly?
It's possible it could have some effect, but the overall basin heat content is still quite high. And things like weaker trade winds could allow that cooler surface water to mix out and warmer water to come up fairly quickly. So the prevailing thought is still that the warm Atlantic is a major factor favoring activity.
Okay, so warm water overall is still a big plus for storms. What else? You mentioned wind shear earlier.
Right. Besides the ENSO influence, the expectation is for generally weak wind shear across the tropical Atlantic this season.
So less disruption for developing storms. They can kind of build up without getting knocked over by strong upper-level winds.
Precisely. Weak shear lets the storm structure stay organized and allows it to strengthen more readily.
Okay, warm water, weak shear. Anything else?
One more piece is the potential for an active West African monsoon.
Ah, the monsoon. How does that connect?
Well, the monsoon generates tropical waves, disturbances that move off the coast of Africa out over the Atlantic. And these waves are often the seeds for some of the strongest, longest-lived hurricanes we see. An active monsoon means more potential seeds.
So putting it all together, neutral ENSO not getting in the way, generally warm ocean fuel, weak shear, allowing storms to grow, and maybe more seeds coming off Africa, it sounds like. Well, it sounds like the ingredients are there.
Yeah, it points towards what meteorologists have been calling a high-activity era in the Atlantic continuing. This era is marked by that higher ocean heat content and atmospheric patterns like weaker trade winds that just generally favor storm formation and intensification.
Okay, that paints a pretty clear picture for why the forecast is above normal. But you mentioned uncertainty earlier, especially with the neutral ENSO. What are some of those question marks that could still sway how the season actually unfolds?
That's a really important point. These forecasts are about probabilities, not certainties. And ENSO-neutral years, historically, are kind of wildcards.
How so?
We've seen ENSO-neutral years produce everything from very quiet hurricane seasons to extremely active ones. There's just a wider range of possibilities compared to when you have a strong El Niño suppressing things or a strong La Niña boosting things. So that neutral state adds inherent unpredictability.
And that slightly cooler spot in the main development region compared to last year, that fits into the uncertainty too.
It definitely does. It's a difference from the setup we saw heading into 2024 when that region was exceptionally warm. It doesn't cancel out the overall warmth, but it's a nuance, a variable that forecasters are tracking.
Any other unexpected factors popping up?
Well, there's an interesting global observation. As of late May, when these forecasts were coming out, the entire northern hemisphere hadn't actually seen its first storm reach tropical storm strength yet this year.
Really? None at all by late May. Is that late?
It's quite late compared to the average climatology. And what's kind of intriguing is that a similar slow start globally happened in 2024 as well. And that did factor into some forecast thinking then. How this current global quiet period resolves,
Yeah.
well, it adds another layer of complexity.
So it's like the whole climate system is interconnected in ways we're still figuring out, and little anomalies can pop up.
Exactly. Experts often mention lesser understood climate variables around the globe that also play a role. It's a complex dance.
Okay, so we have this forecast. Likely above normal, backed by warm water and weak shear, but with caveats around the neutral ESO, that specific cooler patch of water compared to last year, and maybe some global weirdness. What does this whole picture mean for you, the listener? Why should someone inland pay close attention?
This is really the bottom line. These seasonal outlooks give us the big picture, but preparedness is personal. And storms like Helene and Debbie last year drove home the point that devastating impacts, especially inland flooding, can happen hundreds of miles from where the storm makes landfall.
Yeah, thinking you're safe just because you're not on the beach. That's just not realistic anymore, is it?
Not at all. So, given this forecast, what are the agencies like NOAA and the National Weather Service doing to, improve warnings and help people get ready this year.
Are there new tools or improvements coming online?
Yes, they're constantly working on it. They've stated they have, and I quote, never had more advanced models and warning systems in place.
That's good to hear. What specifically, are the forecast models getting better?
They are. They're continuing to upgrade their main hurricane model, the Hurricane Analysis and Forecast System, or HAFS. The goal this year is another 5% improvement in accuracy for both the storm's track and its intensity.
Even a small improvement there can make a big difference in lead time, I imagine.
Absolutely. And speaking of lead time, they're also extending how far out they can issue certain warnings.
Oh, like what?
The National Hurricane Center can now issue advisories, like watches and warnings, up to 72 hours before life-threatening storm surge or tropical storm force winds are expected to reach land.
72 hours. 3 days notice for those specific impacts. That's huge for planning.
It really is a significant increase in potential warning time. And their longer-range outlook, the Global Tropical Hazards Outlook, now goes out 3 weeks instead of 2, giving an even earlier heads-up about potential development areas globally.
Are they doing anything different with how they communicate the warnings? Making them clearer?
Yes, several things there. They're introducing Spanish language text for key products like the Tropical Weather Outlook and public advisories, which is great for reaching more people.
That's important.
And they're continuing with that experimental forecast cone graphic that shows the inland watches and warnings for the U.S.
I remember seeing that last year, showing the warnings extending way inland. Any changes to that?
Yeah, a useful tweak this year. The experimental cone will specifically highlight areas that are under both a hurricane watch and a tropical storm warning at the same time. Helps clarify potentially confusing overlapping zones.
Okay, that makes sense.
They're also making a point to provide a dedicated rip current risk map whenever there's an active tropical system.
Rip currents. Why the special focus there?
Because swells from a hurricane far out at sea can create dangerous rip currents along coasts days before the storm gets close. Or even if the storm never hits land at all, it's a hidden danger tied to these systems.
That's a really good point. What about new tech? Are they using any new gadgets to study these storms?
They are. They're using an experimental radar system called ROARS on the P-3 Hurricane Hunter planes. It actually scans downward from the aircraft.
Downward? What does it measure?
It collects data on the ocean waves and, crucially, the wind structure right near the sea surface inside the storm. That's really hard data to get otherwise and helps improve intensity forecasts.
Wow, getting data right down at the ocean surface. And for the inland flood threat.
They have an experimental tool called the Probabilistic Precipitation Portal. Basically, it's a user-friendly way to see forecasts for heavy rain and potential flash flooding up to 3 days out.
So helping people visualize that rainfall threat, like what we saw with Helene.
Exactly, trying to give more specific, actionable information on that inland flood risk.
Okay, so lots of advancements in the background, better models, longer lead times, clearer communication, new tech. But bringing it back to the listener, what's the #1 takeaway message from the experts right now?
It's simple and it's consistent. Be prepared. This forecast, leaning above normal, is your signal to take action now. It's not about predicting exactly where storms will hit.
Right, it's about the overall potential for the season.
Exactly. So make your plan. Know your evacuation zone if you're in one. Gather your supplies. Do it now before a storm is even on the map, let alone threatening your area. Don't wait.
Preparation today means less panic tomorrow. And just to reiterate, this forecast covers the whole 6-month season across the entire Atlantic Basin. It doesn't tell us about specific landfalls.
Correct. And NOAA will issue an updated forecast in early August, just before we hit the typical peak of the season, so we'll see if anything has changed by then.
Okay, so to sum up, experts are predicting an above-average 2025 Atlantic hurricane season. Key drivers are the warm Atlantic waters and likely weak wind shear, though the neutral ENSO phase adds a layer of uncertainty.
And there are those other nuances, like the MDR temps compared to last year and the slow global start.
Right. But importantly, forecasting tools and warning systems are improving, giving potentially more lead time. The crucial message, though, remains personal preparedness.
That's the essence of it for this stage of the season.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. When you hear about these complex global factors influencing our local hurricane season, and you remember how impacts like flooding can reach so far inland, how does that change the way you personally think about being prepared? Does it make you feel more connected, maybe, to these large-scale weather systems?
It certainly highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? Local weather isn't always just local.
Absolutely. Well, you can find more great weather insights and the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist by following meteorologist Rob Jones. He's on Instagram as meteorologist. Check him out on TikTok as TV meteorologist. And definitely subscribe on YouTube at Rob Jones Hurricane.
Thanks for tuning in for this look at the season ahead. Stay informed, everyone, and please stay prepared.